And so, as far as these go, the Ionia card, I don't understand what you're supposed to be doing. Oh, Blade isn't like an actual. That's the thing that is supposed to be like, oh, Aurelia is coming around, and so that's kind of whatever. Chip, fantastic unit. He seems to get a lot of hype on the old Reddit. I guess Chip is a fan favorite right up there with Timo. But getting a 3/3 for 1 mana that's not super hard to activate. He might be trying to give Legion Rearguard a run for his money. I don't want to call it out too early, but it seems like Chip is a pretty reasonable unit. And then Clockwork Curator, this is really what Talia needs, and some of the Zillion cards are exactly what Talia needs to not be abysmal, right? We get, you could even see in that trial there where it's like we get the 2 mana landmark and you have to wait 3 turns, or you get the 4 mana landmark and have to wait 2 turns. It's just so brutal that it's like, okay, I need to affect the board now. Let me spend 4 mana on this and get some payoff like 3 turns from now, right? You don't get it this turn and you have to wait 2 turns. So it's like a total of 3 turns for the payoff to show up. It's way too brutal. And so things like Clockwork Curator, I don't think that, units like this really solves the problem, but I think it, really helps. And then, kind of in the sense that we don't know what landmarks are going to be out there, helps in that sense as well. Even like with this deck we just drafted, if we were able to, maybe take 7 ticks off of the Sun Disk without a champion, and then having 17 off in total, then that would get the Sun Disk flipped on turn 8. That's not unreasonable. So that would be like 2 Clockwork Curators and one of that 3/4. That's going to give it a 7 or 8, and then the champion gets us up to 17, 18. It's pretty reasonable. You could see that working as well. But glad to see that they're throwing a little bit more support. That's why when I was talking about in that recap in the first part of the video, that if some more Shurima cards come about, then they should definitely be out here improving. But it's a good start. It's a good start, and it looks like the landmarks are going to be over in Targon as well. That does kind of come up. Is this the one that has the? No, it's not. Which one of these? Just more landmark cards? Like Preservationist, I don't think is particularly good. I think the landmark advancing needs to be cheaper than more expensive. This feels like it's a card that should probably cost 4 mana. It's probably something you'll end up playing but not being happy about. With the clock hand, when I'm summoned, create 2 instant centuries. Which ones are those? Oh, summon a random landmark with countdown or advance a landmark 4 rounds. Not that bad, but this dude's pretty expensive. Like, these engines need like a bit of help, right? The payoff needs to be pretty big if you're going to be pulling this off, and it doesn't feel like the payoff is big enough here. What's this one? Imagine possibilities. Create a random landmark with countdown in hand, or advance all of your landmarks 1 round. That's not horrible. But again, like, how many landmarks are we going to have on the board for this to ever be a real card? And so, feels like you'd be playing this more so as the create a random landmark, and that's not particularly good. You'd rather just have the epic, which shaped stone doesn't seem to be too hard to come across, but not really impressed with this either. And then the last one down here, time in a bottle, predict and advance an allied landmark 2 rounds. More reasonable. Like, the thing with like something like time in a bottle is that if you're playing like both themes, which you see quite a bit, like in the Talia pool, then it's probably reasonable. Like, why can't this card just draw a card? Because you're already spending 2 mana for an ability that's not that great. And so if this just cycled, it would be fine. And so, well, if it's not just going to cycle, if it's only going to predict, then, how good can we actually make this? If you've got a lot of the predict themes in your deck, then fine. Or if there turns out to be some kind of just like absolutely ridiculous predict card, then it could also be good. Like, I do make like a lot of Magic references, but like the card that comes to mind for me is out of like Onslaught block with Lightning Rift, and that was just like an enchantment that when you cycled a card, you could pay 1 and deal 2 damage to something. Like, that is the kind of cards that you're willing to be like, okay, I'm going to come out here and just like build around cycling as hard as I can. Especially if you got a card with like Astral Slide with it. But that's where time in a bottle really needs to be. Like, is predict really good enough to come out here and build around? That'll depend on if they make a card that does that. But clock hand advances the Sun Disk 8 rounds. Yeah, I mean, sure. It's sort of like another champion, but that's like a humongous investment to make in that. Like, I'm almost kind of like, well, what if there was a card that just like said, spend all of your mana, reduce a countdown by that much mana? Like, would we be interested in playing that? Maybe. That's kind of like what the clock hand feels like. Taking a card down 8 is reasonable. Taking 2 cards down 4 is reasonable. But at like the turn 8 stage of the game, is that like really what we're looking to do? Like when we're playing these 8 mana epics, it needs to just win the game. Otherwise, why aren't we playing like Alpha Wildclaw? And so um, I'm not really sold on the clock hand being that good. I don't. It's like I look at a card like the 8/8 for 8 that destroys a landmark or destroys all the landmarks. It does 2 to everything. It's like you've gone through all the work to play this unit. You've got the payoff for it, but then it still just can't do anything. That's what this one kind of feels like to me. And so we'll see. I have high hopes for Countdown, but those cards, I don't know if they're doing it for me. But Zillion, he's kind of interesting. Yeah, you only got the Sun Disc on your mind. I know Organic Chicken. Like it's reasonable though. Like I could see that being a deck in Expedition. I don't know if it's good enough for Constructed. That seems like a tall order. But if all these things go right in Expedition, like if you're drafting a Zir Talia or Zillion Talia or a Zir, any of those combination of 3 champions, and you end up in the Sun Disc deck, then sure, I could see that being a thing. And then Zillion has got some hype. I'm always kind of interested in these champions when they only cost like 2 mana. So he's super cheap. He comes down on the board. Like these 1/4s aren't nearly as good as like 2/3s, but from a mana standpoint, he's fine. And then he creates these things in your deck. The time bomb when I'm summoned, draw 1 and advance all other time bombs 1 round. Then a countdown to 1 to deal 1 to enemies and the enemy nexus. It's pretty reasonable. What is that? More than half the time, you don't even get Sundisk with Ascension packs. Yeah, Sundisk it's something tough to come across. Again, like I've only drafted it. I know I've drafted once and didn't post it in this one, and then I might have had one more. So across all the expeditions I do, however many, you know, 100 or so I've gotten in through Empires of the Ascended, I've seen the Sundisk maybe 2 or 3 times. But like Time Bomb is reasonable. It's a pretty heavy investment. Is my only problem with it. Um, and it's just it's tough. Like you can't complain about like the having a 2 mana AOE for 1 that replaces itself. Uh, does it replace itself when I'm summoned? Draw 1, yeah, but you actually have to draw it is kind of the problem with this, and so I think he'll be fine. This is kind of one of these champions that it takes me a bit of work to actually like accurately assess. I typically don't like abilities like this where you're just shuffling time bombs in your deck and you actually have to draw it for it to be good. But if you're able to like actually create time bomb, like I notice that it doesn't have like a little symbol on the bottom, so I know you can't draft it. But if you're able to create it with whatever that previous create a countdown card was, or if you're able to uh, play, it's not Shapestone, whatever the epic Talia card is, maybe it's kind of interesting. But actually having to like physically draw these things or try to like predict time bombs to the top of your deck, that's just a little too high rolly for what I like to pull off. And so you could maybe look at him as like sort of a Twisted Fate that just has to do some high rolling. But I think he feels like he's probably just going to be like in a vacuum like a tier 3 champion, and then if his card pool is not that good, then I could see him dropping down to like tier 4. But this like from the cards I've seen up to this point, I don't see him being a particularly fantastic kind of card. But I do also know Reddit's been going bonkers over Soothsayer. I do not think this card is that great. The stats are terrible, and granting allies and things spell shield not that bad. If you're in some kind of like champion build around thing, then sure, this can be reasonable. But I think Reddit has like super overvalued Soothsayer. The stats aren't good. It just comes down on the board and doesn't do anything. And then you actually need the unit on the board that you want to protect before you play this thing. It just takes a whole lot of work for not a whole lot of payoff. And so, say what you will, Reddit. I don't think Soothsayer is very good. With these other ones up here on the top right with Scrying Sands, give a unit -2 attack and predict. Again, this kind of like all of these predict cards feel like the Lightning Rift example, as to where if there's some kind of like true engine card that's like, hey, do something powerful when you predict, and you get some kind of payoff for drafting all these predict cards, then fine, that's good. But on its own, not losing a combat isn't that spectacular. I mean, I guess this is probably okay. It's like, well, it's not better than Brittle Steel. But I guess if like we're willing to play Elixir of Iron, then we're probably also willing to play Scrying Sands. And so I'll probably have to, backtrack a little bit on that and say that this is probably one of the better combat tricks that there is. I'm usually just not a huge fan of these tricks that let you not lose combats. I like tricks that help you win them. And so that's probably fine. Now that I think about it a little bit more, I get like all hyped up about that predict and want to talk trash on it. But giving an enemy neg 2 this round is probably not that bad. And then Zillion's Chrono Shift. What is this? Give an allied champion the next time I die this round, fully heal me, grant me +3/+3 instead. Oh, it's his flip. That seems like a tall order as being good. Uh, I mean, I guess like we're willing to play uh, Unbreakable Spirit, whatever the 8 mana Demacia card is, and that's pretty okay. I've never been like shit. Yeah, I have this like Unbreakable Spirit. I'm never going to lose this draft. I've just been kind of like, this is kind of neat. Let's play it on Lux, and we'll probably win that game. That's kind of how Chrono Shift feels. I think it's good as a flip. Like if we're ever in this spot where we just want to come out here and draft 3 Zillions, it feels like a pretty reasonable flip card. I don't think it's a card that we want like physically in our deck, and so I think it's one of those things where we'll have to kind of be like, oh man, it's late game, and we're trying to like deal with this opposing champion, and he has Zillion on the board. It's probably not going to die, but in the sense of like a 7 mana spell that does this, your champion doesn't die this round effect, probably don't really want it. So, yeah, I'll stand by that one. I take things back on Scrying Sands, but I think the Chrono Shift, it's fine as a champion flip, not a real card that we'd ever want. So, what's that? You love Yeti Yearling though? Yeah, I mean, I don't love Yeti Yearling, but I mean, he's fine. He's good. He does that little bit of work that you need him to do. All right, and then what should be the exciting cards? What is this? Bone Skewer. I remember reading this. Not really impressed with this. It ally strikes an enemy, then put it on top of your deck. There are some uses for this. Bilgewater has crappy removal, and then getting things like it's like, what is the best card that you want to replay? Is it really the Fortune Croaker? Like that doesn't seem worth it, but that's the price you pay for a removal spell in Bilgewater, and so it's like I'm sure that there has to be something where this is you can get some value out of replaying the unit, but in general, like if this was in like Noxus, I would say this is trash. But being in Bilgewater, it's probably fine, just because they have so much trouble with removal. Until you get down to Monster Harpoon, and then you're just like, oh shit, they actually do get removal. You'd be pretty happy just to pay 6 mana at fast speed to deal 5 to a unit with a Plunder. Making this on the cheap, pretty powerful spell. This will be a Bilgewater staple. Succumb to the Cold. I'm not real hype on this. It's really weird with these cards. Like when you push 2 cards together, like which ones are good and which ones aren't. Like, am I hype about Harsh Winds being like 2 Flash Freezes pushed together? Yes. Am I hype about pushing Flash Freeze and Frozen Thrall together? Like, not so much. But I mean, it all depends on the tools that Lysandra gets. Right? Yeah. I mean, Succumb is bad. It feels bad, but like in the vacuum of the cards that we know now, I think it's bad. If they make more things like the whatever that rando epic is, the only Frozen Thrall card in the game, if they make some more stuff like that, then can Succumb to the Cold be good? Sure, but are the cards that have been released up to this point, is it good? Not really. No, it's not, and so we'll have to see how that plays out. The Wings and the Wave. I've been kind of cool with this guy. Like whenever we talk about these Kindred style decks, or the Afterlife kill your own units kind of decks, we're just always looking for some way to sacrifice off a unit, and this guy does it reasonably. And so just having a 1-cost 0/1 that puts another 0/1 into play, very happy with it. And then if it's just going to be a later game card to where you use it to slay a unit and get a 3/3, then sure, that's reasonable as well. He's epic, so I'm sure we won't see it too frequently, but it's a reasonable card, and all those cards and all those decks that want to kill off their own units. And then, Buried in the Ice. What is this? Obliterate each enemy to summon a Frozen Tomb in its place. So it just Frozen Tombs your opponent's team. I assume that just wins the game, right? This is just like a non-mana play it and win the game spell. Like that's my problem with that 4/7 epic dude that does the stuff with the landmarks, right? You play him and he just doesn't like win the game. Like we play any number of these like I'm just thinking of like the KDA cards that are expensive. Like you play Feel the Rush or you play the Harrowing, you play Give It All. Like all of these cards just win the game when you play it. Buried in the Ice just wins the game when you play it. Otherwise, that one dude, he's just like, oh, I just put a 4/7 down that gets blocked by your opponent's 2-drop. Like it is just completely not interesting. That's what 8 mana One Who Wanders card that destroys landmarks. Yeah, that's I mean that's a way to do it. You can just double uh, kill their team at that point. But I mean, you've realistically just won the game at that point, anyways. And all right, all of the Targon, all the Targon landmarks. There's been a lot of memes about spiral stairs on Reddit generating the Seed of Strength. It's a reasonable spell. I don't think it's better than Zenith Blade, unless there's a lot of real payoff for playing the landmarks. But it's fine. Seed of Strength is pretty reasonable in the decks that want it. Tarek is pretty happy to have it. I guess when it comes to Malphite, he's happy that you're playing landmarks that can then give him Overwhelm. Reasonable thing there. Rockfall Path, Targon's been really hurting for removal, so it's a removal. I'm not really sure what we think of Rockfall Path. It's like at worst, you're going to be trading like 1 mana for 2 mana, but if you play it on like turn 6 and you're able to, catch your opponent's 4-drop, or if your opponent plays, I don't know, like a Zillion and has just, a 1 attack champion on the board, then sure, the Rockfall Path can really shoot up in value. I don't think that Targon's going to be like super picky about the removal they get to play, and it'll end up being fine. But yeah, the Seed of Strength has fleeting and slow. I don't think it makes it bad. I think it's certainly different than like Zenith Blade, and I don't think it's as good as Zenith Blade. But a lot of the problems that you run into with the with what are they called? Targon decks really want Overwhelm, and so it fixes a lot of the problems that those decks have. And so yeah, I don't think it's spectacular, um, but I still think it's fine. Yeah, I mean, I guess it is tough having to hit those countdowns. I mean, I think ideally you would be able to, probably like play it and count it all down in the same turn or something, or prepare it to come into your hand the next turn. With all of these countdown reducing cards, I'd hope you'd be able to kind of like finagle it a little bit. But yeah, you're certainly right. It does take a little bit more work, and that work may not be worth the payoff. But I still imagine that like whoever wants these like Leonas and Tereks and Lee Sins or whatever, they're not going to argue too much about how they actually get their overwhelms. Imagine having a 0 mana Zenith Blade 2 turns later, investing 3. Yeah, uh, it's tough. I mean, I can see how it can go wrong, especially when you're kind of like advertising what you're doing, but I don't think it's horrible. I'm not like, shit, yeah, Spiral Stairs is the best rare in the set. I just don't think it's like I would rank it at like a 1.5 or a 2. It's like one of these cards I don't think we're ever going to be going out of our way to find. I don't think you're ever going to be like, shit, yeah, I'm playing Spiral Stairs, unless like you're in some kind of like full on Malphite build around. But I think it's also one of these cards where you're just kind of like, well, if it's paired with a Fledgling Stellacorn, never taking it. If it's paired with, I don't know, whatever good rares in Targon, then okay. Like we're not going to pass on Spiral Stairs and like a Daybreak invoke. Sounds really bad when you say it like that, Zelda. But anyways, on to these other ones. Earth Elemental is reasonable. He's right up there. If we're always like reasonably happy with Bull Elnix as a vanilla 4/5, a 3/5 Overwhelm is fine. We've kind of seen that with the rando troll and Freylord that gets regenerate sometimes, and then summoning 4 landmarks to give him 3 attack. This is occasionally a 6/5. If this is a 6/5, like in 40% of your games, you're super happy with Earth Elemental. Fantastic card. The only problem is it seems like Targon does tend to get a glut of 4-drops, and so you have to be a little bit careful there. Up here with Blue Sentinel, he's completely fine. He will be, a card we're going to be seeing a ton of. Any of these 2/3s for 2 mana with upside are completely fine, and the getting a piece of ramp out of this thing is a pretty good deal. And so, if you play this on turn 2, trade with your opponent, and then have 4 mana on turn 3, that's a pretty good deal. This guy's going to be a staple of the old Targon package. Easy. It's easy when you see him like that. Get out of here. I don't know how Twitter works. I gotta I gotta figure out these buttons. I think there is one more screen, and then we can call it a day. It's the Malphite. Somebody won the America's Championship. Props to you. I didn't see who that was. The only the only person I was familiar with was Raptor. I knew he was the old. Oh, there's two up here. The old Magic Pro of old. I guess he probably still plays Magic and works on Eternal. But congrats to E Rigby. You are the big winner. But oh yeah, there's two now. So with Malphite, I think he is reasonably strong. He feels like one of these champions to where it's kind of two things, right? He needs enough landmarks to where I should pause and restart that. He needs enough not bad landmarks to where it doesn't feel like a chore to level him up. Summoning 12 mana of landmarks, it should just be like, four, maybe five landmarks, which it doesn't seem like too big of a deal. But I haven't seen any of the what are they called? Any of the unit generating landmarks, and so time will tell whether or not enough Targon landmarks exist, or if he has to be paired with Shurima to think that he's a reasonable flip. But much like all these other cards we've been talking about, he just wins the game when he flips, and so again, like with that 4/7 that gives you the countdown cards, he doesn't immediately win the game. Malphite does, and so. He just strikes me though as one of these champions that we'll look at like Darius as to where, we've got one great, our top end is kind of covered for, and then if we don't have enough top end, we can draft a second one or even a third one. That doesn't seem like that's too much of a problem with Targon where you can just play invokes, but Malphite, he's reasonable. He that just bring in the memes, huh? Just play four spiral staircases and then play four of the overwhelm card on Malphite, stun all your opponent's units, and just attack and win the game. Yeah, like all synergies, all combos, all the time. You got that one down. But then with these other ones, Malphite's flip and ground slam is reasonable. Always nice to see, removal spells coming to Targon, dealing 3 damage at fast speed for 4 mana is a good deal. Adding the stun on top of it is fine, but you do have to be playing landmarks, and so we'll see how that plays out. It's also kind of interesting in the sense that it gives what's his name Yasuo another stun, and so I don't think this would be too common as to where you're playing Leona Yasuo, but if there's some kind of reasonable landmark in there, I think it'll be a reasonable option in that way. Ground slam is a big deal for Targon. Yeah, well, I mean that all depends on how much landmarks are around and reasonable, and so I think this is one of these cards that like you're never going to see it in like specific decks. Like it's just going to be in the Malphite card pool. Like ground slam's not going to be in like a Diana card pool. Like it makes sense if it's in a Tarek card pool, but it's not going to be like all over the place. But this is like a truly bad card if you don't have landmarks in your deck. But yes, this is like I'm not disagreeing. It is big. Targon just doesn't have any real removal in there outside of Sunburst, and so it is like super happy to see even like conditional removal show up. There's like so many times when I'm like, well, fuck, I'll play a Trouble Bubble, right? Like I'm not like excited about playing Trouble Bubble, but they're so like starved for removal that you'll just play it, and so I think it'll be reasonable in the decks that have probably like 5 landmarks in it. So that's not like too big of a deck building constraint to have a pretty powerful removal spell. I wish we could see how rare it was over here without having like the little thing on the bottom. It's probably like a physical rare. I can't imagine that this is a common, but we'll see. Then with these other ones, the old Stonebreaker, if you summoned 4 landmarks this game, deal 4 to an enemy, 2 to the Nexus. That's 100% spectacular. We're always happy to play Abyssal, not Abyssal Eye, whatever the Abyssal from the depths, I don't know, the sea monster, right? He's the easiest comparison, and it's a lot harder for this guy to go wrong. And so I'd imagine we'll be snatching this guy up pretty happily anytime we're in a landmark deck. Okay, then I did see one up top. I think they posted one before I scrolled through Twitter this morning. What are these? These are all fresh. What are these? All Targon cards? And there's some Ionia stuff with a picture of Zed. So, all right, let's slow it down and see what we get. So, A new 2 mana Daybreak for Leona. Fantastic, as we've been having trouble with Leona here recently. Um, Nice to see her get another 2 mana play. And this is, something that's pretty good early and pretty good late. And so the Sunhawk will be, pivotal to any Daybreak build around. What is this? Another Targon landmark. Countdown 1, stun the 2 weakest enemies, and then Daybreak. Interesting to see Daybreak on these things. Summon a copy of me with countdown 2. And so it stuns the 2 weakest enemies 2 turns in a row. I mean, Yasuo is excited about that. So that's kind of interesting. It's like I'm trying to think of how to place that because like we're always pretty excited about the Cloven Way. Like even in our not like super aggressive decks, the Cloven Way is pretty reasonable. The Eye of Rahorek is no Cloven Way, but I think the decks that really want this ability will be pretty happy to have it, especially in the sense that like if we're playing Daybreak Leona, they have so much trouble just closing out games. Another one of those decks where it's just like I have 40 stats on the board, but our opponent just keeps blocking with turds. Taking out 2 blockers 2 turns in a row is a pretty big deal, and then having a second Daybreak is nice, and so it's one of those cards, kind of like Intimidating Roar or Decisive Maneuvers, where it's like I want 1 copy. If I don't find my 1 copy, that's fine, but I want 1, and then I never want 2, and so it seems all in all pretty reasonable. Shadows of the Past. What's this? Recall each ally and summon a living shadow in its place. I'm never like really hype about these cards. I guess it's another card that's good with Yasuo. It plays to some ephemeral themes. I've never been like real hype about the total recall theme, where you're trying to get a bunch of value out of like replaying a bunch of units. So I'm not real hype about that. It seems it's just like one of these cards to where it's like, I don't know, is there a combo with it? I'm not good at seeking out combos, but if there's a combo, this seems like a really good enabler. Or it's like, how many Green Glade duos are you playing? So I'm not really sold on this being a reasonable expedition card. You can stun 4 on the same turn if you have countdown tricks. Yeah, I could see that. I'm not. That's kind of like a big ask, but I guess if that big ask wins you the game, that's not a big deal. And then maybe a nice way to get some refill and Kinku elusives. Yeah, the Shadows of the Past. I can't remember if you're the guy that's big on the Kinku Wayfinder. I mean, it's a thing you can do with the Wayfinder. I would just think that you're really looking at Green Glade Duos and Navori Blade Scouts as your big answer and big happy points with this, or your sparring students. I don't really see it. I think we'd rather just have something like what is it? The thing that makes 2 ephemeral copies of 1 unit. It seems a lot safer than playing this and saying like, okay, I want to take this like 8 or 9 mana I have on the board and then just take it off the board after this turn. Like it's a reasonably scary play to be doing. Recall each ally. Yeah, it doesn't do it to your opponent's units. And all right, we've got 3 more, 3 to go. The Profiteer. When I'm summoned, create a lucky find in hand. Hey, Shurima needed another 4-drop. I mean, I guess she is okay. I'm not really excited about this, but 8 stat 4-drop that comes into play and generates a card isn't horrible. It's just Shurima is horrible about having way too many 4-drops. It says people are speculating on it working with the new champ. What, the Shadows of the Past? Oh, doing something with Irelia? I don't know. I don't know enough about League of Legends lore. The times I played, I wasn't like really familiar with Aurelia, and so maybe. I mean, they had that one card way down at the bottom. Where are you at? This thing, Blade, whatever this is, obliterate me when I leave combat. I don't. I'm not seeing it with that one, but I guess if there's a lot of kind of like unit generation with that kind of thing, it might be a thing. I don't know. We'll just wait a day and see. And then, last but not least, there is the Merciless Hunter. Play and grant an enemy vulnerable. Not a bad card. Nasus is super happy to have this show up in his pool. Just being able to come down and pick on your opponent's 2-drops or get in a strong attack. I am really interested in how this, like, Nasus picking up all of these fearsomes and then being able to generate the negative attack on your opponent so they can't block your fearsomes. I think that's pretty interesting. And so we'll see how that plays out. Oh, I skipped over Dancing Droplet. I got excited about those other ones. When I'm recalled, draw 1. This card is fine. Being a 1/1 elusive for 1 that that gives you the mana back. That's not a bad deal. I'm on board with this card being okay. The problem with this this kind of card is there's not a whole lot of combat tricks that Ionia is like super interested in playing. But I mean, he plays really well with your Navori conspirators. He's not like Navori Blade Scout where he loses elusive, and so if it like replaces itself on the first turn and gets in like 3 damage across the course of the game, it's probably a reasonable enough value for a 1-drop. I'd give it like a 2. Uh, Probably closer to a 2.5 than a 1.5 for the Dancing Droplet. But yeah, I think that is it. I think that's going to do it for us today. Let me scroll up one more time and see if there's any things coming up here. Combos with retreat, like a combo with retreat to get turn 2 Zed. I mean, that's not like bad, but it's not spectacular. Like that Zelda, that comment is where I'm kind of like on board with Dancing Droplet. Like I'm always pretty happy with Shell Shocker, and what if we take away a point of attack to give it elusive? It's probably a pretty good deal. Um, but playing stuff with like retreats, you never want retreat in your deck anyways, and like that playing Dancing Droplet into retreat Zed to get an attack on turn 2 only works half of the time, right? Because you only have the attack token on 2 half of the time. And then like what happens when the times where this goes wrong, where you have like retreat and Dancing Droplet in your hand? Like I guess it like replaces itself, like it cycles a little bit, but I'm not like that. That's not enough to make me ever want to play retreat. More on the constructed side, yeah, sure, but I don't know. I've never been like really big on retreat, and so it is something that makes it not horrible, but uh, kind of is what it is. Maybe there'll be something else. It feels like retreat's a card where I want to be putting like a 3 cost into play with it, and it's kind of hard to really pull that off with consistency. And so, but yeah, that is going to do it here. This is our kind of haphazard initial impressions. I will do a full set review in the future. And then, as this video is coming to a close, again, this was another impromptu Twitch stream. If you do want to see us on Twitch, you're going to have to come over here and give us a follow. I try my best to give advance notice with these things. I will start trying to post it to Twitter. But if you miss out, I feel bad, but I don't have a better way to do it.